Hi everyone, Anshita this side. Welcome back to AV Automation Hub. In today's video, I'm going to share most asked automation testing interview questions which are asked by interviewers again and again. So in this video, I will break down those commonly asked questions and show you how to answer them. So now let's get started. So here's the first one. What is automation testing? It's very simple, but many people mess it up. So what you can say, automation testing is basically writing the code to test your applications instead of just clicking through everything manually. So instead of me sitting there for hours, clicking the same button, filling the same form, I write a script that does it for me. Say something like, the best thing about automation is once I write the script, I can run it whenever I want. Even early morning, during the weekend, whenever I want, I can just run it and it catches the bug faster. And I don't go crazy if I have to run the same test case 50 times. So this is what we have mentioned over here. It is a process of writing script that simulate user actions on the application, user action like clicking the button or typing into input box. So it replaces manual clicking and data entry. You don't have to do anything manually now. It is useful for repetitive tasks and it helps to save time. But also mentioned, automation is not always perfect. Of course, it's only as good as person writing it, and it can't catch everything a human would notice because it will only perform the actions which you have written in the script. It will not perform anything which as a human you would do while doing the exploratory testing. Now moving on to the next one, when you should automate test. This question separates the beginners from the people who actually know what they are doing. So while not everything should be automated, that's the first thing to understand and that's the first thing to tell also. You can say, I usually automate when I know I'm going to run the same test case multiple times. For example, especially for the regression testing, like I have to test login functionality after every release. So in that case, definitely go for automation. And then you can go more specific. For example, you can say, I also look at whether the feature is stable. If the developers are changing the UI every week, my automation scripts are going to break. And in that case, I will not spend time in doing the automation because that will be just wastage of time. And you can say this is something which I learned experience or during my last project. So that is what we have mentioned here. It is more effective when test is run frequently. For example, after every release, the functionality is stable and unlikely to change. And then you're doing regression or smoke testing. But here's the important thumb rule. If there's a test which you are going to run more than, let's say, 3 times and the feature is not changing much, then it's probably worth automating. Otherwise, there's no sense of automating that test. It will be just extra effort for you. You're just creating extra more work for yourself. Now, moving on to the next one, manual versus automation. What is the difference? So just don't give them the definition. Tell them why both matter. So in this case, you can say manual testing is when I actually test the application like a real user would. I'm clicking around, trying to break things, seeing everything feels okay or not okay. It's great for finding the bugs that you never would have thought to write a script for. But automation, it is more like having a really fast, really accurate robot that does exactly what I tell it to. Perfect for checking that all the basic stuff still works after we make the changes. But also make sure you add some extra flavor. You can say automation only finds what you tell it to look it for. I don't write a script, it will not check that. It only checks if I write a script for that. So that's why you need both. You need automation for the boring, repetitive stuff, and you need manual testing for the creative problem solving. So that's what they have mentioned here. We have mentioned manual testing is performed by a tester, by a human. It's great for exploratory and UI UX validation. It finds unexpected bugs. In automation testing, it runs pre-written script. It's fast, reliable, and it does the repetitive task. It covers known stable area. Now, the next one is what are the common tools in test automation? They can also ask you what tools do you know. So just show what you actually understand what they are for. So maybe you can try this approach. You can say Selenium is probably the most common one. I've used it on pretty much every project. It works with major browsers and you can write scripts in multi-languages like Java, Python, and whatever you're comfortable with. And you can also mention, maybe I have also worked with tools like Cypress or Playwright, which are comparatively newer, but are really faster than other existing tools in the market. And the debugging is really good in these tools. You can actually see what went wrong on the same execution screen, and you don't have to go back to your ID. And for mobile testing, you can say I have used APM. And for API testing, you can mention Postman, if you're manually testing API, then Postman is one of the best tools available in the market. You can also write your scripts in Postman. But for other automation, you can go with the Rest Assured, Cypress, Playwright. Once you understand the concept, switching between tools is not that hard. Each tool has its own strength and limitation. Choose based on your use. Moving on to the next one, what is a test framework? So make it more relatable, not very technical. You can explain like this. A test framework is basically a structure that keeps all your automation code organized. So without it, your test becomes a complete mess. Maybe you can give some real-time example. You can say we can use some test framework like TestNG in Java, PyTest in Python, or Mocha in JavaScript. So using this, you get a clean way to organize your test, set up the data before test run, clean up the data after test run, and plus you can also run the test case in parallel, which will save a lot of time. So that's what we have written over here. A test framework provides structure and support for running automated tests, organize code and test data. It manages setup and cleanup. It enables the parallel execution and reporting. Moving on to the next one, what are locators? Make it this more practical. You can say locators are how you tell your script which button or which field you want to interact. For example, it's like giving directions to find a specific address. There are different type of locators, like there are attributes like data test ID or ID, XPath, CSS, name. So attributes like data test ID are actually the custom HTML attributes that are specifically added to elements to make them easier and more stable during your automation testing. For example, in Playwright, it supports targeting the element using this attribute directly. For example, in Playwright, you can use get by test ID. Whereas in Selenium, you can use by.css selector, by.name, by.id. Always choose selectors that are stable. Moving on to the next one, which is page object model. What is page object model and why to use it? So don't just define it, explain why it matters. So you can say page object model is basically separate class for each page of your application. So instead of having element locators scattered all over my test script, I just keep everything for the login page in the login page class. Similarly, everything for the dashboard in the dashboard page class, and similarly for the other pages as well. The reason why this is preferred because of its maintenance. And you can also add something like this. I learned this lesson when developer changed one button and suddenly 20 of my test cases were breaking. Why? Because I used login script in all my 20 test cases. But with the page object model, that same change would only require me to update one line of code and in one file. And it's really a lifesaver. That's what they have mentioned over here. Page object model is a design pattern which is used in test automation to help organize and structure automated tests into more modular and reusable structure. And what are the key concepts? Each web page is represented by a separate class. Page class contains locator as a variable and action as a method. Separates test logic from the UI implementation detail. And when UI changes, you only update the page class, not every test. You can give an example of a login page. Now moving on to the next question. What are the challenges you have faced? So be honest about your real problems. You can say the biggest pain is when elements take forever to load. And sometimes they appear, sometimes they disappear. And another challenge which I face is the maintenance. Every time there's a UI change, something breaks. I have spent entire days just fixing that test script. And honestly, sometimes test fails for completely some random reasons. Maybe the server was slow that day, or maybe there was a network issue. So these failures are sometimes frustrating because you spend your time investigating something that is not actually completely broken. So this is what we have mentioned over here. The most common challenges which test engineers face are elements that load slowly or that change dynamically, flaky test case due to the UI updates, or sometimes we overuse, sleep, or wait, due to which that slow down the test execution, and high maintenance cost for unstable test case. So these are some of the common challenges, and the learning from this is expecting these problems and building your test to handle them from the start. Moving on to the next question, which is basically mistakes to avoid in automation testing. Or they can also ask you any automation mistakes that you have made. So this shows your self-awareness and learning ability. So just be honest. You can say, early on, I tried automating everything, even the test that made no sense to automate. I spent days writing the script for the test, which I could have manually tested in 5 minutes. You can also mention something like this. I also used to write some super complex tests that try to test everything in once. So now I have kept my test more organized, more simple, and focused. I used to think automation will solve all my testing problem, which most of the test engineers think, but it does not. It's just one tool performing the actions which you have mentioned in the test script. It will not do something extra or something less. You still need good manual testing and you still need to actually understand what you are testing. So that's what I have mentioned over here. These are some of the common mistakes which you can avoid. You can avoid automating unstable or low value features, writing some overly complex script which are very hard to debug, thinking automation replace manual testing, skipping test reviews or validation. This is also one of the mistake which test engineers do. So these are some of the common mistakes, and always understand automation is not a replacement for testing strategy. You still need good manual testing and you still need to understand what to test. All right, moving on to the next one. What is AAA pattern? So AAA pattern stands for arrange, act, and assert. A simple but very useful way to structure your test that makes them more cleaner, readable, and easy to maintain. That's what I have mentioned over here. Arrange, act, and assert. Arrange, set up everything you need for the test. For example, preparing the test data, navigating to the correct page, and setting up the preconditions. Then is act. Act means actually performing the action. For example, clicking the buttons, filling the forms, making the API calls, executing the main action. Then comes the assert. Assert means basically you will check the message which are appearing on the page, you will verify the data is saved, and you can confirm, let's say, navigation. You can check new URL is actually the correct URL where it should be navigated to. Moving on, why use AAA pattern? Because it gives you more clarity. If someone reads your test case, they will understand what is being tested. There will be a consistency, and when you are debugging the test case, when there is a failure in the test case, you know which part exactly failed. And maintenance wise also, it's very easy to modify sections without impacting the others. Generally, in some teams, what happens, they also add comment like arrange, act, assert, so that any new joiner or junior tester joining the team, they understand code base better. So these are some real-time automation interview questions, and just understand the secret is not memorizing the perfect answer. It's about understanding the concepts well enough so you can have an actual conversation about them. Because interviewers can directly tell who knows the stuff versus who has just memorized it. Get your hands dirty, write some test case, break some things, and in case still you're not able to crack the interview, don't worry. You can learn from it and do better next time. So yeah, that's all for today's video. I hope this is helpful. And if you like the video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. So good luck for your interview. And thank you for watching AB Automation Hub.